win today's fight. From a whole of government perspective, our new Air Force leadership, and I will probably drop the word new at the end of the year, but today they're still new, Secretary Donnelly and General Schwartz, have recently, in about the last month, have taken a look at the Air Force as it exists today and put out 5 priorities that no matter what direction the next administration wants to go, I think the key is these 5 themes in the Air Force are going to play out in the QDR in whatever context, whatever strategic context we are taking. And those 5 themes, which are well publicized, but I want to repeat here, is we've got to, as a service, reinvigorate our nuclear enterprise. That goes without saying. The Chief and Secretary recently announced after Corona that we're going to stand up a major command to do with nuclear operations. We're going to stand up a numbered Air Force to deal with cyber operations. But the #1 priority right now, or the first priority of 5, is to reinvigorate the nuclear enterprise. They've also made it very clear, again, this tension that we have to continue to support today's joint and coalition fight that we have to win. We have to develop and take care of our airmen, because without the right people in any of the services, we cannot do our jobs. We cannot win this war. We cannot prepare for the future 20 years from now without making sure we take care of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardmen we have today. We also have to strengthen our acquisition enterprise. We're not doing a great job getting programs out the door. And there's a whole host of reasons for that we're getting our arms wrapped around in the Air Force in particular. And lastly, we've got to continue to look at modernizing our organizations, our training, and our equipment, because like all the services, we've been preaching this here this morning, we are certainly facing a strategy and resources problem in the future. And that's what this QDR, among many things, is going to have to tackle. Let me switch gears here real quick to the Air Force total force. Like the other services, the Air Force, Air National Guard, and the Air Force Reserve are heavily involved in the current fight. We pretty much went through all the units when we had mobilization authority, but in most of our mission areas, we cannot do what we're doing today without the Guard and Reserve. I'm an air mobility person by background. I've flown airlifters and tankers, and it goes without saying, the folks in the room who know this, but it goes without saying that at least 2/3 of our air mobility force structure, for starters, is owned by the Guard and Reserve. So if you go to Southwest Asia today and climb in the back of a C-130 or a KC-135, there's a very good probability that the people flying that aircraft are Guard and Reserve air personnel. Short story, my first assignment was flying C-9 Medevac at Scott Air Force Base. I did not know what a reservist was. My very first flight as a dumb second lieutenant, 26 years ago, I was sitting in the right seat of a DC-9 playing stupid co-pilot. It took me about a half a day to figure out the guy sitting next to me, who was phenomenal, was an Air Force Reserve pilot, a major, who had been flying the same airplane with Northwest Airlines for 20 years. He had 20,000 hours in that aircraft. I have learned since that it's an amazing marriage we have in the Air Force of the total force. So much so that about 5 years ago, we decided to just institutionalize this under the heading of total force integration. Actually started out as future total force. But what really I'm pleased to say is in the last 2 years, we have now published Air Force instructions and policy documents that have institutionalized how we really do not just hand me down old equipment to the Guard and Reserve and say, figure out how to fight with it. That we now are equipping the Guard and Reserve with frontline capabilities, not platforms, but capabilities. There is a whole range of things that the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserve bring to the play today that some didn't exist 5 years ago. They are there to support the GWAT, and I could sit here and probably talk for another 10 minutes about that range of capabilities, but I want to thank the Guard and Reserve for truly stepping up. We have 135 major initiatives, and from an active duty standpoint, which I am, the active duty forces are now doing things like associating with reserve forces. So we have always had reserve associate, now we have active associate. And we also have about 18 initiatives that are BRAC affiliated that have to do with total force. I'm also pleased to say that thanks to the Department of Defense and the administration and Congress, we now have legislative authorities that give us a lot more latitude on how we integrate across the total force among all the services that came out of the last 3 National Defense Authorization Acts. And I can go into more detail in the Q&A if you'd like. Just in closing, real quick, I'd just like to say that all of us are here, I would say pretty much hand in hand. This is not a helmet-to-helmet contact thing. We are all waiting to find out what is the best way that the Department of Defense is going to support the next administration, is going to support each other in the fight, to support the joint warfighter, and lastly, certainly to protect and defend this nation. and give the best bang for the buck to the American taxpayer. There's going to be natural tension in that, but we're all going to work together. We're all going to get through it. Thanks very much.